The smart metering in CBSE is a very useful module to analyze electrical consumption as well as water or gas usage. Also, a different price per meter can be assigned in order to make an automatic calculation of costs based on consumption data. Configuration of the necessary process points. We should first create the process points for the relevant meter readings. For instance, in the case of an energy meter, we need to create the process points for the active power, instantaneous consumption in watts, and that of active energy, consumed energy, in kilowatt hours. Optionally, we can create process points for those phases and loads we wish to analyze. So as to achieve proper operation, all these process points must be registered in the database. To do so, the log enabled flag should be enabled in the properties of the process points, as well as the interpolation feature. Additionally, we recommend that the readings are not only subjected to change, but are taken at a constant and relatively short frequency. The reason for this is to simplify the calculation and achieve a most accurate representation of the current consumption. Sometimes it's possible that we need to use the polling or cyclic sending function from the logic module. In order to configure the meters, we go to the menu modules, Smart Metering. We then find the configuration window for the meters. From here, we can create our own meter topology with the necessary folders. To create a meter, we press the button Add Meter. Now we see the configuration form for this meter. As we can see, the configuration of the meter is divided into 4 sections. In the first one, we configure the main properties. Let's start by naming the meter. We also enter a short name that will appear in the legend of the graphics. The type of meter must be selected. For this example, we are choosing an energy meter. Next, we select the process point for the active power, then that of the active energy. Please note that the meter expects both process points to be configured with a default measuring unit, watts and kilowatt hours in this case. If our data points are not set in these units, we must apply transformations in the process point to adequate the relevant unit. It is also convenient to configure the maximum value that can be achieved by the real meter. This can be of help to know when a full cycle has been completed, and thus to do the consumption calculation properly. In the smart metering, visualization values can be represented in different measuring units. From this panel, we can configure all those we wish to work with. For instance, if we would like to see our meter's consumed values in euros, we press the button Add and select Euro. Next, we introduce the conversion factor between the default unit, which is kilowatt hours, and the euro, for example, 0.1256 euros, the kilowatt hour. On top of that, we can record the date in which a variation in price occurred, as well as a description. This way we can keep a data log of price variations. Finally, we press the button Save to finish. As we can see now, both the values of the meter in kilowatt hours and euros can be displayed in our visualization. Optionally, we can configure the phases of the meter so as to include in the visualization their instantaneous consumption. The next section in the configuration window is related to the meter's visual aspect. Let us go to the tab called Style. Here we can select the style of the meter. We can choose from one of the 3 pre-configured styles or create our own ones. We are now creating a new style. To start the process, we press the button Add. A form opens up. We can introduce the style's descriptive text. If we wish, we can configure the possibility to see additional information when going with the mouse over the value in the graphics. Also, if we want to include in the graphics the horizontal lines that represent the limits of the meter. The next step is to define the maximum amount of euros that we expect to consume monthly. This will help determine the consumption bracket we are in. A default color for this meter can be selected. Also, an upper and lower limits for the estimated consumptions, in order to narrow the graphic representation. To end up with, we can fine-tune the colors to make them vary depending on the consumption bracket we are currently in. The reference will be the maximum expected monthly expense. Finally, we press the button Save. Once saved, it must be selected from the list. In the next section, we can configure the loads. The configuration of the load allows the calculation of the approximate consumption based on the time they remain on. We can add a load with the button Add. A form opens up for us. We now introduce a name to identify the load. Hereafter, the process point that controls that load, which must be a 1-bit process point, must be selected. As soon as the process point has been selected, we come upon the configuration parameters for the load. We can establish the known on or off value for the load to start consuming, and also with which value it will stop consuming. We can also define the load's consumption when it is on, for instance 250 watts, and the measuring unit. Finally, we press the button Save in order to finish the configuration. The last issue we can configure related to the meter are the limits that allow us to send a warning message subject to certain conditions. Limits can also be visually represented in the graphics if we have selected this feature in the meter's style configuration. We can add a limit with the button Add. A form opens up to proceed with the setting. We now introduce a name to identify the load. We select the process point of the active power or else the phase that should be relevant to establish the alarm's condition. The type of condition and the threshold can be determined here. In this case, we will be sending an alarm as soon as the active power exceeds 3000 watts. Lastly, we can introduce the message shown by the alarm and the visual style of the limit in the graphic. We press the button Save to finish the configuration of the limit. Once all the parameters of the meter have been configured, we press the button Save, once again on the window to save the meter. Thank you for your attention.